Good evening. Welcome to Loveworld USA News. I'm Barbara Sam. First, a quick look at the top stories this evening. Trump administration sues Maine over transgender athletes. Escalating clash on Title IX compliance. Colorado Democrats advance bill to spend $4 million defending state against Trump administration policies. Federal judge finds probable cause to hold Trump administration in contempt over migrant deportation flights. China faces 245% tariffs as U.S.-China trade war escalates. UK Supreme Court rules women means biological sex under equality law in landmark decision. And now to the news. The Trump administration has filed a lawsuit against the state of Maine, accusing it of violating federal Title IX laws by allowing transgender girls to participate in girls' and women's school sports. The Department of Justice, backed by Education Secretary Linda McMahon and Attorney General Pam Bondi, is asking the court to force Maine to bar all biological male students from competing in female-designated sports categories. The lawsuit follows a month-long standoff between President Trump and Democratic Governor Janet Mills, who had previously rejected a proposed federal settlement. The administration argues that Maine's policy contradicts President Trump's executive order, keeping men out of women's sports, signed in February, which mandates that sex-based programs receiving federal funding use a biological definition of sex. Bondi said the issue is a top priority for President Trump. The lawsuit also references specific cases, including transgender athletes who recently won first-place titles in Maine state competitions. Governor Mills and Attorney General Aaron Frey have pushed back forcefully, asserting the lawsuit is more about political posturing than legal substance. Mills described the case as a federal overreach. Frey emphasized that Maine is following both state and federal law and criticized the Trump administration for attempting to impose an executive interpretation of sex without legislative authority. The lawsuit is the latest flashpoint in a growing national debate over transgender rights and gender identity in sports. 26 states now have laws or policies restricting transgender girls from participating in female sports. And the Trump administration has signaled it may target additional states like California and Minnesota. With legal challenges mounting and elections ahead, the case could become a key test of how far federal agencies can go in shaping state-level education and civil rights policies. Let's take a look.
Today, the Department of Justice is announcing a civil lawsuit against the Maine Department of Education. The state of Maine is discriminating against women by failing to protect women in women's sports. Pretty basic stuff. This is a violation of Title IX. The Department of Justice will not sit by when women are discriminated against in sports. This is about sports. This is also about these young women's personal safety. I've met many of these women throughout the past weeks and months, and what they have been through is horrific. We have exhausted every other remedy. We tried to get Maine to comply. We don't like standing up here and filing lawsuits. We want to get states to comply with us. That's what this is about. We have repeatedly notified Maine of its infractions and urged them to remedy the situation to protect women. You know, President Trump, before he was elected, this has been a huge issue for him. Pretty simple. Girls play in girls' sports, boys play in boys' sports. Men play in men's sports, women play in women's sports. We are going to continue to fight for women.
Colorado House Democrats are pushing forward legislation that would allocate $4 million in taxpayer funds to shield the state from potential legal and financial repercussions stemming from its defiance of executive orders issued by the Trump administration. The bill, titled Support Against Adverse Federal Action, passed the House Appropriations Committee on Tuesday and now heads the full House for debate. The measure gives the governor broad authority to use the funds for hiring legal counsel or contractors to respond to federal actions that could jeopardize Colorado's access to grants, contracts, or funding streams. It would also cover legal fees for state employees targeted in federal investigations related to their public service. Democrats argue the funds is a necessary safeguard against politically motivated federal retaliation, particularly over state policies concerning abortion, transgender health care, and environmental regulations. Republican lawmakers harshly criticizes the bill, calling it a misuse of funds originally intended for infrastructure projects. They pointed to ongoing challenges in education, healthcare, and public safety as more pressing priorities for Colorado residents. The debate comes amid broader clashes between Colorado lawmakers and the federal government. State legislation passed this year includes measures expanding abortion access, protecting transgender youth, and limiting cooperation with out-of-state probes into reproductive and gender-related health care, all of which have raised concerns over compliance with Trump's executive orders and potential funding freeze from Washington. Watch this.
Here we are in this bill giving the governor $4 million for we don't know why, but we think we do, but it's not stated specifically. So therefore, there's not a transparency factor if it's not in black and white and can be easily understood. So I'm proposing that instead of that going to the governor, that we take a portion of that and fund these people that are going to help many of our citizens in Colorado far more than we can ever know.
District Judge James Bosberg has determined there is probable cause to hold the Trump administration in contempt of court for defying a court order that temporarily blocked deportation flights to El Salvador last month. He issued a 48-page ruling Wednesday accusing the government of willful disregard for his March 15 emergency injunction and directing the administration to explain its actions or face potential prosecution. Bosberg had halted deportation under the Alien Enemies Act to allow for legal review and order that all planes already en route to El Salvador be returned to U.S. soil. Despite this directive, 2 planes carrying more than 260 migrants landed in El Salvador hours later, where detainees were transferred to a maximum security prison. The judge called the government's failure to comply a contemptuous act and gave officials until April 23rd to justify their noncompliance or risk a criminal contempt referral. The White House Communications Director, Stephen Chung, responded swiftly, announcing plans to seek immediate appeal relief and reiterating President Trump's commitment to removing what he called terrorists and criminal illegal migrants. The Trump administration has framed the deportation as vital to national security, while critics accuse it of circumventing judicial oversight. Judge Bosberg's ruling escalates the ongoing legal and political battle between the judiciary and the Trump administration. The court is now demanding to know who in the administration authorized the defiance of the order and has warned that individual prosecution may follow if significant justification is not provided. Let's take a look.
Federal Judge Bosberg says that he's found probable cause to hold President Trump's administration in criminal contempt of court for violating his orders to turn around planes carrying deportees to El Salvador. He's warning he could refer the matter for prosecution if the administration does not return to U.S. custody those who were sent to El Salvador's prison in violation of his court order. Now, the Trump administration says those who were deported are violent gang members.
This administration will obey court orders, unlike the last administration. But if you ask me if I'm in favor of returning terrorists to the United States that are gang members, that have, murdered and raped young women in this country, no, I'm not in favor of that at all.
So meantime, the pressure is mounting to bring back a Maryland father to the U.S. Kilmar Abrego Garcia was deported back to his home country of El Salvador on what the Justice Department calls an administrative error. Abrego Garcia's wife calling for his release during a rally on Tuesday. The Trump administration, however, still refuses to facilitate his return.
An appellate judge ruled he was a member of MS-13. Hard stop. He should not be in our.
The news will be back after this break.
This is one of the most important days, in my opinion, American history. It's our declaration of economic independence. My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day. April 2nd, 2025 will forever be remembered as the day American industry was reborn, the day America's destiny was reclaimed, and the day that we began to make America wealthy again. American steel workers, auto workers, farmers, and skilled craftsmen watched in anguish as foreign leaders have stolen our jobs, foreign cheaters have ransacked our factories, and foreign scavengers have torn apart our once beautiful American dream. Our country and its taxpayers have been ripped off for more than 50 years, but it is not going to happen anymore. We are finally putting America first. In a few moments, I will sign a historic executive order instituting reciprocal tariffs on countries throughout the world. We will supercharge our domestic industrial base. We will pry open foreign markets and break down foreign trade barriers. More production at home will mean stronger competition and lower prices. From this day on, we're not going to let anyone tell us that American workers and families cannot have the future that they deserve. We're going to produce the cars and ships, chips, airplanes, minerals, and medicines that we need right here in America. We're going to build our future with American hands, with American heart. This will be
The Trump administration has referred New York Attorney General Letitia James to the Department of Justice for potential prosecution. Allegedly, she committed mortgage fraud by misrepresenting details on past property records. The referral made by the Federal Housing Finance Agency, known as FHFA, was outlined in a letter sent Tuesday to Attorney General Pam Bondi. According to FHFA Director William Pulte, James allegedly claimed a Virginia property as her primary residence, despite serving as a New York elected official at the time, and listed a New York property inaccurately to qualify for more favorable loan terms. She is also accused of identifying her father as her husband on mortgage applications dating back to the 1980s and early 2000s. Legal experts say these discrepancies could constitute violations of federal lending laws. A spokesperson for James dismissed the allegations, calling them a politically motivated effort by the administration to retaliate against her legal actions targeting Trump. The allegations come as James continues to pursue multiple legal challenges against the Trump administration, including her landmark civil fraud case that resulted in a $454 million judgment against Donald Trump and the Trump organization. That case remains under appeals. Watch this.
Falsified records in order to get home loans for a property in Virginia they say she claimed as her principal residence in 2023. According to the federal agency, as Attorney General, James is required by law to have her primary residence in New York. The agency also alleges that James, in numerous documents, misrepresented a building she bought in Brooklyn, saying it only had 4 units instead of 5. And they allege that James purchased another property with her father as a co-signer, but falsely listed the pair as husband and wife in 1983 and 2000. But these allegations are somewhat similar to the ones that President Donald Trump faced. James won a civil case against Trump in 2023 that found him guilty of overvaluing his properties in order to take out more favorable loans. Trump is currently appealing that decision.
The U.S. has imposed a combined tariff rate of up to 245% on some Chinese imports, significantly escalating its trade war with Beijing. The rate includes a base of 125% reciprocal tariff, a 20% fentanyl-related tariff, and a pre-existing Section 301 tariff, some of which reach 100%, particularly on items like electric vehicles. The new figure was published by the White House in a fact sheet accompanying a fresh executive order investigating U.S. dependency on critical minerals from foreign sources. This aggressive move comes as China tightens export controls on rare earth elements, materials vital to electronics, aerospace, and defense industries. In response, Beijing has retaliated its right to defend its trade interests, calling the tariffs unreasonable, but stopping short of announcing specific new countermeasures. China's foreign minister emphasized it does not seek conflict, but is not afraid to defend its position. Amid the growing tension, China appointed Li Chengyan, a WTO veteran and advocate for free trade, as its new trade negotiator. His appointment may signal a shift in Beijing's negotiating posture as both sides signal conditional willingness to engage in talks. Still, further retaliation remains likely in what has become a broader economic and geopolitical power contest. President Trump defended the tariffs on Truth Social, claiming other nations, especially China, have taken advantage of the U.S. for far too long. He signaled further action on semiconductors and the electronic supply chain, emphasizing the need to reduce dependency on foreign manufacturing and bring production back to the U.S. Let's take a look.
Post announced suspension of goods mail services to the United States, effective immediately for sea mail and from April 27 for air mail. Hong Kong Post has sharply criticized these tariff hikes, calling them unreasonable and bullying. The agency has made it clear that it will not collect U.S. tariffs on behalf of the U.S. government. However, mail containing only documents will remain unaffected. This suspension highlights the escalating trade rift as Hong Kong now faces the same tariffs as mainland China. This comes after losing its special status under U.S. law following Beijing's imposition of a national security law in 2020. Meanwhile, China has also instructed domestic airlines to suspend the purchase and delivery of Boeing aircraft and related aviation components from the U.S. The decision is expected to impact American suppliers significantly. Chinese carriers seek government support to cope with the rising costs of leased jets. Although high-end tech goods like smartphones, semiconductors, and computers were early exempted by the U.S., the aviation sector remains deeply affected. Boeing's market value has already declined by 7% since January. The ripple effects of the tariff war are being felt across sectors. The U.S. tourism industry recorded an 11.6% year-on-year decline in international visits this March, a trend travel analysts are calling the Trump slump. Airlines, including Delta, have adjusted operations in response to falling bookings and policy uncertainty. Meanwhile, tech giants are taking preemptive action. Apple, in a high-stakes logistical move, airlifted $2 billion worth of iPhones from India to the U.S. to avoid shipping delays and potential tariff complications. the company joins a growing list of manufacturers overhauling global supply chains to stay ahead of disruptions. As trade tensions escalate, businesses are recalibrating operations, while geopolitical uncertainty continues to weigh on investor sentiment and cross-border commerce.
A leading Harley-Davidson shareholder is calling for the removal of CEO Jochen Zietz and 2 other longtime board members, citing poor performance and a lack of transparency at the top of the iconic motorcycle manufacturer. H Partner Management, which holds a 9.1% stake in the company, issued a letter to shareholders Wednesday urging them to vote withhold at the company's upcoming May shareholder meeting, effectively signaling a lack of confidence in the re-election of Zietz, Thomas Leinberg, and Sarah Levinson to the board. The move is a direct challenge to Harley-Davidson's current leadership as the company navigates a CEO transition and ongoing financial setbacks. The investors' criticism centers on Zietz, who announced plans to retire and is currently overseeing the selection of his successor. H Partners argued that an absentee CEO who has already announced his intention to retire should not be making decisions that could affect the long-term prospects of the business. It also accused Zietz and Leinberg of lacking transparency and failing to hold each other accountable for what is described as poor performance and strategic stagnation. Harley-Davidson shares have plunged over 24% since the beginning of the year and are down 42.7% over the past 12 months. The company reported a 14.9% drop in revenue for 2024, falling to $4.12 billion in net income, declining to $455.36 million. In its public letter, H Partners urged the board to install an interim CEO immediately and begin an external search for a permanent leader. The firm also emphasized the need for new leadership to repair the relationship with dealers, engage with riders, restore Harley's physical presence in Milwaukee, and return the company to greatness. Harley-Davidson has not yet issued a comment in response to the demands. The news continues after this break. Stay with us.
The countdown to the Lord's soon return has begun, and in this first quarter of the year of completeness, Loveworld USA has indeed been spreading and preaching the gospel of our Lord Jesus, preparing the hearts of billions around the world to expect the Lord.
This year, we will complete the full preaching of the gospel in all nations.
Loveworld USA broadcasted life-changing programs with our man of God. Global Communion Service, Your Loveworld Specials, Global Day of Prayer, Healing Streams. Loveworld News, where we emphasize truth and deception. Truth Watch USA, where Americans are exposed to the truth. Topics such as the failed agenda of so-called globalists, what's really happening to your food, President Trump, a sign to the church. Prayer programs where effective prayers were offered. Tremendous Power, Pray for America. Faith-filled programs like I'm Just Saying, Pastor Chris Worth reading, Stick to the Word, programs with Pastor Benny, and many more. We say thank you, dearest partners, for contributing towards our programming and daily operations through your partnership. Loveworld USA is positioned for a massive harvest of souls all around the world as we set our sail to reach more people in this second quarter, in more languages, and change more lives. This is a call to our dearest partners all over the world to join this mandate in completing the full preaching of the gospel to all nations as you sponsor our 2025 projects. 1. Pastor Chris in 1 Billion Homes Project. Ensure the spread of the message of the man of God through Loveworld USA. The spread of our ministry programs and agenda through satellite, cable, internet, digital, mobile apps, Alpha TV, OTT platforms, our news, and our current affairs. 2. Minutes to reach billions 4.0. Make your every minute count for the gospel as we spread the awareness of Loveworld USA to your world. 3. Translation of our language-specific channels. Make it possible for billions around the world to watch our programs in their native language. 4. Tag your name to a program. Sponsor and tag your name to our various Loveworld USA programs. You can adopt a specific program. 5. Studio upgrade. Join us today with your lavish gift to the work of Loveworld USA. Every SPs or dollar you give goes to accomplishing our mandate to fully preach the gospel with our life-transforming content. For more information, please call the number showing on your screen. God bless you.
Welcome back. In a significant legal development, the UK Supreme Court ruled on Wednesday that under the Equality Act 2010, the term woman specifically refers to biological sex. The decision, streaming from a case brought by campaigning group for Women Scotland, known as FWS, clarified that the term woman, as used in this key civil rights legislation, does not include transgender women, even those with a gender recognition certificate. The court emphasized that its ruling applied only to the interpretation of the Equality Act and not to the broader society or legal definition of gender or womanhood. The case focused on Scottish legislation from 2018 that sought to improve gender balance on public bodies and initially included gender individuals within its definition of woman. FWS challenged that inclusion, arguing it conflicted with the Equality Act. The UK Supreme Court agreed, stating that the conflating sex and gender reassignment within the same category could create legal confusion and undermine protections designed for both groups separately. Responses to the ruling have been sharply divided. Women's rights activists, including author J.K. Rowling, hailed the decision as a critical step in safeguarding biological sex-based protections. Conversely, LGBTQ+ advocacy organizations criticized the ruling, warning that it could undermine decades of progress in trans rights and contribute to discrimination. Let's take a look.
Britain's highest court ruled on Wednesday that only biological and not trans women meet the definition of a woman under equality laws. The landmark decision was greeted with dismay by trans supporters, but welcomed by the government as bringing clarity. It's the latest example of the wider debate around transgender rights ending up before the courts. Here is Deputy President of the Supreme Court, Patrick Hodge.
The unanimous decision of this court is that the terms woman and sex in the Equality Act 2010 refer to a biological woman and biological sex. But we counsel against reading this judgment as a triumph of one or more groups in our society at the expense of another. It is not.
The much-anticipated ruling focused on whether a trans woman with a gender recognition certificate is protected from discrimination as a woman under Britain's Equality Act. Critics said that including a trans woman as a woman under the law could impact single-sex services for women, such as refuges, hospital wards and sports. But transgender campaigners said that excluding them could lead to discrimination, especially over employment issues. Wednesday's British judgment followed legal action by a campaign group for Women Scotland against guidance issued by the Scottish Government that accompanied a 2018 law designed to increase the proportion of women on public sector boards. The guidance said that a trans woman with a gender recognition certificate was legally a woman. Here is Susan Smith, co-director of FWS, outside the court in London.
And today, the judges have said what we always believed to be the case, that women are protected by their biological sex, that sex is real, and that women can now feel safe, that services and spaces designated for women are for women, and we are enormously grateful to the Supreme Court for this ruling.
The Supreme Court said trans people, whether trans women or men, would not be disadvantaged by its decision, as the Equality Act afforded them protection against discrimination or harassment. But the legal experts said the ruling showed equality legislation might need to be urgently updated to ensure trans people were protected.
South Africa's newly appointed special envoy to the United States, Mebisi Jonas, is facing controversy just days into his new role, following the resurfacing of a 2020 speech in which he referred to the U.S. President Donald Trump as a racist, homophobic, narcissistic, right-winger. The comments made shortly after Trump's 2020 electoral loss to Joe Biden have drawn sharper attention amid already strained diplomatic relations between Washington and Pretoria. Jonas, a former deputy finance minister, was tapped by President Cyril Ramaphosa on Monday to serve as South Africa's representative in Washington, following the expulsion of the country's ambassador last month by the Trump administration. The White House cited anti-American rhetoric and what it labeled race-baiting remarks as reasons for the dismissal. Jonas is now tasked with repairing a diplomatic relationship rocked by executives' actions, including Trump's recent order halting all U.S. funding to South Africa over what he described as anti-white and anti-American domestic policies. The 2020 speech delivered at South Africa's annual Amid Cathedral lecture focused on global inequality and democratic backsliding. He also expressed hope that Biden's victory will signal the defeat of deglobalization forces, a nod to Trump's America First policy. Though Jonas has not directly addressed the resurfaced remarks, he acknowledged the diplomatic challenge ahead, saying he would work to promote a healthy working relationship with the United States. His appointment comes amid heightened tensions, including Trump's contentious offer to extend refugee status to white South African farmers, a move widely criticized in South Africa as based on misinformation. Let's take a look.
Right now, the U.S. is undergoing a watershed moment, with Biden the certain winner in the presidential race against the racist, homophobe Donald Trump. How we got to a situation where a narcissistic right-winger took charge of the world's greatest economic and military powerhouse is something that we need to ponder over.
Just before we end the news, a quick look at tomorrow's weather forecast. And to end the news today, a quick recap of the headlines. Trump administration sues Maine over transgender athlete escalating clash on Title IX compliance. Colorado Democrats advance bill to spend $4 million defending state against Trump administration policies. Federal judge finds probable cause to hold Trump administration in contempt over migrant deportation flights. China faces 245% tariffs as U.S.-China trade war escalates. UK Supreme Court rules woman means biological sex under equality law in landmark decision. And that's the news for today. Join us at the same time tomorrow for more news. I'm Barbara Sam. Good night and God bless you.